Let's welcome to Danny Lewins. Thank you. How are you, Danny?
Feeling good.
Feeling good? So nice finally to be here.
Yeah, good to be with you in person.
I'm very excited for getting to know you more and reading all the things that you have, all your passions. It's fascinating. So I want to introduce a little bit of the qualities and the studies that Danny has. So today we're here to enjoy the knowledge, the experience, the passion of Danny. Danny Lewins, is I pronouncing it right? Close enough?
Lewin.
Yes. Lewin. Okay. He's a PhD. Also, he has the D.ABSM, that I imagine that is behavioral sleeping medicine. Then also is CBSM. I don't know what is exactly the...
Medical board and behavioral board and sleep medicine.
Great. Board Sleeping Doctor, Sleep Health and Wealth Center. Danny is a licensed clinical psychology, a sleep medicine researcher, clinician, and pediatrician psychologist. He has also was founding director of the Behavioral Sleep Medicine and Pulmonary Behavioral Medicine program at the Children's National Hospital, and also an associate professor of pediatrician and psychiatry at the George Washington University School of Medicine. Danny has also published more than 50 articles and chapters, and also a writer, right? Danny is particularly honored have served a mentor and supervisor of hundreds of pre- and post-doctoral fellows in psychology, medicine, nursing, and dentistry. He's passionate about educating, providing the public about sleep health, and he has the certification also in yoga, meditation, and also is a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist. He enjoyed being a father. The 23 years old. I don't have the name of your son. Good. That's a good son coming to support you.
The only work that really matters.
Yeah, that is amazing. And also, what is Chimp, your terrier? Okay, next time you have to bring a terrier. Okay, everybody will love you more if you bring their dog in Santa Barbara, right? Okay, the topic of today is exploring sleeping, circadian health, which I need to understand that this is even hard to pronounce for me. Circadian health and sleeping consciousness. So, can you tell us something, kind of educate us about that?
I will jump in and try to do that.
Thank you. It's all on you.
Great. Thank you so much, Fernando. Again, great to be with you in person, and all of you as well. Thanks for coming. I want to say thank you to Jacob, District216, phenomenal center here that's doing so much for so many communities here in Santa Barbara. I want to say that all are welcome here at this talk. All races, all ethnicities, all religions, all gender identities, all sexual orientations, all shapes and sizes, all abilities and disabilities, all languages, and all ages. I will try to address in the most respectful way everyone in the most caring and thoughtful way. If that somehow does not happen, if you feel left out, if you feel like your feelings are hurt, then I will really welcome your feedback. I also just want to acknowledge this exquisite place where we live and the peoples who were stewards of this land for probably 15,000 years, the Chumash peoples, and then how much we also owe to just the beauty of our landscape, our trees, what is left of our trees, of our natural environment, of our animals, etc. So what I'm going to be talking about are some basic definitions of sleep and circadian states. So I'll also talk about what sleep health means, some of the functions of sleep that we now understand through years now, decades of science in sleep and circadian health. And then I'll talk about consciousness during sleep and non-ordinary states. After giving some context for that, particularly in this setting, I want to make some links between sleep and non-ordinary states, and then I'll guide you through a quick experiential and exercise that really will hopefully bring you deep into an awareness of sleep states and other consciousness states. So what is sleep? From our big kind of Bible of sleep science and sleep health, we define it as a reversible behavioral state and disengagement from and unresponsiveness to the environment. That's kind of our subjective experience of sleep. We also now know that sleep is a complex amalgam of physiological and behavioral processes that is essential for life. Without sleep, we survive about a week. Without food, we survive about a week. So this function is absolutely essential, and hopefully you will understand that there are degrees of consciousness that occur during sleep, and that what goes on in the body and brain during sleep really is absolutely essential for our healthy functioning. Not readable, but that's okay. These are the sleep disorders. Okay, so there are about 80 defined sleep disorders. I just want you to know that, and they cut across many different domains. I'm not really going to go into them, but if you have specific questions about them, we can certainly talk about them as a group or individually if you have specific questions about your sleep. So, during sleep, there are very dramatic changes in brain electrical and electrochemical activity. And this just shows a picture of a couple of electrodes on the scalp. It's how we measure sleep. That shows just how different things are throughout the course of the night. So we start with wake at the top, very random, fast activity. Many regions of the brain, the neurons, the cells are firing at a highly rapid rate. As we then close our eyes and get a little bit drowsy, we then have this pattern called alpha, which is predominant at the back of the head as the visual cortex kind of shuts down. As alpha disappears, we then transition into stage 1 sleep. This is a transitional liminal state, and we're there for about 2 to 3% of the night. There's still a little bit of alpha, but you can see that there's a lot more white space in those waves than, say, the wake state. So things are slowing down in the brain. We then have stage 2 NREM, or non-rapid eye movement sleep, which is about 50% of the night. And that is characterized by sleep spindles, which are associated with both memory consolidation and probably shutting down some of the incoming stimuli from the world, also K-complexes. Stage 3 sleep is deep non-REM stage 3 sleep. Most of the cells in the top of the brain are firing at this extremely slow, highly synchronized rate. Interestingly, rapid eye movement sleep looks almost exactly like the wake state. So when we go into dreaming state, the brain essentially wakes up and is exceedingly activated. Over the course of the night, we transition in and out of these different stages. So we have time across the bottom axis, 2200, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. So from wake, at the beginning of the night, we transition very quickly through stage 1, stage 2, and go into stage 3, non-REM sleep. Then cycle up for just a little bit of REM, which is the red line, back down to stage 3 for a slightly shorter period of time, a little bit more REM, a little bit less non-REM stage 3. So as the night proceeds, we kind of satisfy our appetite for non-REM stage 3 sleep, and our appetite for rapid eye movement sleep increases in the second half of the night. So a few of the important take-home messages here, particularly if you have insomnia or if you kind of wonder why you're perceiving certain things about your sleep, is that sleep is not a unitary phenomena throughout the course of the night. It changes a lot. First sleep, okay, that you see that's primarily stage 3, is very deep. And we feel like we're in this really restorative deep state. In the second half of the night, most of that's gone. So sleep in the second half of the night feels very different. It's primarily rapid eye movement sleep, stage 2 sleep. So it feels lighter. It feels like we're in and out of stages a lot more. We also have micro awakenings during each of these transitions from one sleep stage to another. So in reality, when you have the sense of sleep being a continuous state, right, where you kind of park your car in the garage and shut it down, it's not at all the case. We are in and out of stages and mental states throughout the course of the whole night, and we have these little micro awakenings and actually a few macro awakenings as well. So just a little bit more on the sleep stages, stage 3. And this little cartoon here shows a child. For those of you who have kids, you could kind of scoop up your child if they fall asleep in their car seat, carry them up to their crib, put them down, and they won't budge, right? They're in non-REM stage 3, an exceedingly deep stage of sleep. I'll show you a video of what can happen during stage 3 sleep in a little bit. But this is a passive state. We're unresponsive to most environmental stimuli. There's a shutdown at the level of the hypothalamus. There's a prevalence of parasympathetic influence and a quiescence of sympathetic activity. So in other words, what activates us and gets us to respond in the environment. And the musculature is deeply relaxed. Just a little bit more in the brain. There's this synchronization that's initiated by basal levels of the brain that causes those very, very slow waves to occur. And then there's a deep inhibition of other regions of the brain, basal regions of the brain as well. Rapid eye movement sleep. This cartoon here shows there you can see the EEG C3A2 is the electroencephalographic activity in the brain during rapid eye movement sleep. The eyes during rapid eye movement sleep are moving. And they move, if you were dreaming that you were at a tennis match, we could actually watch the eyes go back and forth, tracking the tennis ball. So there's a variable balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic control. So as we're dreaming, our frontal lobes are not active like they are during the day. So we don't tell ourselves to calm down. So when we have a dream with really intense activity, our heart rate can increase, our respiratory can increase very, very dramatically. So we have this variability in kind of in sympathetic tone. And finally, there's a broad atonia of the peripheral musculature. In other words, we're paralyzed during rapid eye movement sleep, which keeps us from carrying out our dreams. And I'll show you a little bit more about what that is later on. This just shows that there is this shutdown of motor neurons, hyperpolarization of motor neurons, resulting in our inability to move during rapid eye movement sleep. There's an inhibition of the raphe nucleus and the locus coeruleus that control serotonin and dopamine and noradrenaline to some extent that shut down emotional activity during rapid eye movement sleep. So there's a deep suppression, a quiescence of emotional activity. And finally, there's a desynchronization of our brain, of our top part of our brain, our thinking brain. And I'll go into a few more details to compare, say, psychedelic states and what goes on and off during these different sleep states, as well as psychedelic states, and compare those two in a little bit. Okay, so the circadian system. In 2017, the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine was given to 3 researchers who identified clock genes. Okay, so think about what that means. We have clock genes. There are now about 12 to 15 of them that have been discovered. So what this means is that we have clock everywhere in the body and brain. Every cell in the body, except for maybe blood cells that are non-nucleated, have clock, right? So clock is so essential in everything that we do. So when we get off schedule, when we're not sleeping at the time that we should, then we're challenging these trillions of clocks in our brain and body. Some behavioral, but other functions of these clocks across the course of the day: best coordination, noon or 1 o'clock, highest body temperature in the early evening, melatonin secretion, deep sleep. So these clocks are regulating not only these basic functions, but they're regulating functions in really all organ systems. And this cartoon just shows kind of the complexity of the clock and period-based system. But clock is everywhere in our body and brain. And you can imagine skin has clock, brain has clock, liver has clock, heart has clock. And we need to keep all of these clocks coordinated. And our clocks are synchronized with light, which is critically important to kind of keep us in a healthy state and keep us aligned with our environment. There is a very delicate relationship between the circadian system and what I already talked about, which is the appetitive drive for sleep. So that pushes us into non-REM stage 3 sleep and rapid eye movement sleep. So we have a sleep appetite, a sleep drive, and we have a circadian system. And this shows the relationship between them. And there are a few important points that I want to make. with a slide. So time, again, across this axis, 9 p.m., this is the sleep period right here. So when we wake up in the morning, our sleep drive or sleep load is exceedingly low, and we just develop our sleep appetite, so to speak, that's maximal then when we go to sleep at night. There are many different factors in the circadian system and in the brain that regulate that sleep appetite. One of the most important is a byproduct of cellular activity called adenosine. The primary blocker, anybody know what the primary blocker of adenosine is? Caffeine, right? So anytime that we have caffeine later in the day, it's actually blocking adenosine and preventing us from falling asleep. So the sleep load is exceedingly high, hopefully, when we go to bed at night, and then it decreases gradually, and interestingly is almost gone at around 3 to 4 a.m., right? And then exceedingly light in the morning again, and I'll get back to that in a moment. Process C, or the circadian system, the alerting signal is just one of the phenomena of the circadian system, right? If it's in every cell in the body, there are tens of thousands of functions of the circadian system. So the alerting signal is exceedingly low when we first wake up in the morning, right? Which means that we need to be cautious as we're driving, particularly if we're up at a time that is not optimal for us. Teens are a great example here. And then the alerting signal gradually increases. There's a little pause or dip here around the natural siesta time. And then it increases and is actually maximal before we go to bed at night. So we have this burst in activation that we call the burst zone that occurs just before we go to bed at night. So we want that activation, right? If you think about our ancestors who were living on the savannah in potentially dangerous environments, we want a burst of activation before we go to sleep at night to make sure everything's secured. In the 19th century, one of the greatest causes of devastation in cities were fires, right? Because you needed to have candles and you needed to have a heat source in every room of the house. So being activated and focused before you go to bed at night will help you kind of go through your checklist of what's going to keep you safe at night or is essential at night. So we think that's what the burst zone function is. But think about yourself. Think about someone who is anxious, who's had trauma, or a child, and what it's like for them if their brain is tired, if there's a high sleep load, but they're also activated before they go to bed at night, right? For any of you who have insomnia, that feeling of intense activation before you go to bed is highly, highly problematic. In particular, if you don't know that it's coming and why it's there, right? It's particularly problematic. So this alerting signal then falls off precipitously and is essentially gone between 3 and 5 a.m. So again, we have this first sleep, very deep sleep, highly restorative. Second sleep, lighter sleep, more rapid eye movement, stage 2 sleep. And we have this division between these two. The circadian system, the alerting signal that disappears here, helps facilitate our return to sleep in the middle of the night. So it's very, very common for people as they transition from first sleep to second sleep to have a period of wakefulness in the middle of the night, waking up 2, 3, 4 a.m. And then often, what do? You look at the clock, you check the news, you start swearing. Why the hell am I awake? What's wrong with me, right? Am I going to be able to get back to sleep? All of that activation then causes an extended awakening, which we define as insomnia. So in reality, when we do wake up in the middle of the night, we can remind ourselves that we're human and that it's a very natural phenomenon. That's what should be occurring. When this is out of alignment, though, with our sleep timing, then we might have a longer awakening. There's also, as many of you have probably heard, different types of sleep schedules. There's biphasic sleep. So if you can, sleep on this schedule, and some of our ancestors slept this way. Some people will wake up 3 to 4 a.m., get up and work for 3 to 4 hours, go back to sleep at 9 or 10 a.m., sleep for another 2 to 3 hours. People who live around the equator, who are in hunter-gatherer cultures, where it's exceedingly hot during the day, will often stay up late around the fire, talking, engaging, settling issues in their community. We'll sleep for 4 hours. We'll wake up at 4 or 5 a.m., take the cattle out, do what they need to do to prepare the day, and then go back to sleep at 4 in the afternoon and sleep, or 1 in the afternoon when it's exceedingly hot, and sleep for 3 to 4 hours at that point when they can't really do anything else. So the message here is that human sleep is potentially incredibly flexible, right? And we've adapted very, very well as we've migrated from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. But the problem is that what we will tend to do is have a lot of individual variability, okay? Or we'll have differences in sleep need that are problematic. So that individual variability from night to night is problematic. As long as you're sleeping on a regular schedule and accommodate to that on a regular schedule, then you're okay. But if you're trying to sleep at times that are not optimal for you, for example, teenagers have a relative shift in their circadian timing. They're owls, or they like to go to bed later and wake up later. That's a biological change, developmental biological change in the clock that occurs. Whereas adults, and particularly older adults, once we get into our 60s and 70s, we like to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier. Okay, so there are a lot of changes individually, and then there are people, we could probably split you down the middle here, and within families, there's random variability in who's a night owl, who's a morning lark. And if you think about what purpose that might serve, think about, say, antelopes, right, out on the savannah. You do not want that whole herd of antelopes to be sleeping at the same time, right? They would not survive very long. So what you want is you want the awake antelopes on the perimeter, so that they're aware of the lion who's stalking them, and they can set off the alarm, and they all take off. So there's actually a lot of protective functioning in how we sleep related to our environments, and adaptive changes as well. So I'm going to get into the functions of sleep right now. One of the more exciting functions of sleep is that there's a clearing of the brain. And some of you may have heard that sleep protects against Alzheimer's disease and other degenerative brain diseases, and we think this is one of the functions. So literally the glymphatic system, the drainage system, cerebral spinal fluid, and other functions of the brain kind of turn on during sleep, and our brain is literally washed during sleep. All the detritus that accumulates during the course of the day, is the dead cell material, et cetera, is washed out. So this is one very important function of the brain. So other top functions: repair and regeneration of body tissue. Okay, so our muscles heal, brain cells and other cells heal. There's a washing of the brain, consolidation of memory and learning occurs, calibration of immune and metabolic function occurs. A lot of that is associated with the circadian clock. Calibration of neuronal electrochemical activity. So in other words, we've got all of this kind of random activity that goes on throughout the course of the day. The synchronization that occurs in some stages of sleep, particularly non-REM stage 3 sleep, may help with some of the synchronization of brain regions, of very disparate brain regions. Before talking a little bit more about some basics of sleep, I want to talk for a couple of minutes about some ancient conceptions of sleep. And this work goes back. This is actually Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, who I sat with just recently. He wrote this beautiful, beautiful book. This man, he's a Tibetan Lama of the Bon Tibetan tradition, which is precedes modern Tibetan Buddhism by maybe 2,000 to 3,000 years. So they've been practicing the yogas of sleep and dream. So not yogas refer to a whole host of functions, not just the poses that we do. And this is one of the functions. This is one of their practices. They view daytime as a preparation for sleep. Right, so that all we do during the day is a preparation for sleep. And one of the processes that we want to engage in is the clearing of karmic traces. And in other words, all of those little bits of anger, all the things that we've done to hurt others, or where we feel hurt, etc., that we want to work through meditation and through other practices to clear those during the day, in preparation for the night, so that we step into sleep, what they consider a holy period, a period of journeying, a period of deep exploration, without the burden of our daytime activities and thoughts. And then there are lots of practices during sleep and during the day as well that they recommend engagement in that helps us, activates our consciousness in these different dream and other sleep states. And they have a form of lucid dreaming. This is actually very, very similar to modern day practices of lucid dreaming. All of this is in preparation for our final transition, allowing us to guide our awareness into perhaps the bardo. So they've basically, for thousands of years, they've been practicing preparation of these sleep states. They've viewed sleep as not a separate state of consciousness, but as really part of the continuity of our waking consciousness that needs to be treated as such. So I'll show you a little bit that we have recently found that science now supports this. They're, like many other Tibetan traditions, are fascinated with neuroscience and are very enthusiastic about engaging with neuroscientists because of the confirmation of their long-held beliefs by recent scientific findings. So a few hypotheses. Do we explore possibility and potential in the vacuum of our dreams? So in other words, if there's a shutdown of incoming activity during most sleep states, does the vacuum of our dreams, without any interference from the outside world, allow us to journey and explore? Does sleep have different roles across the lifespan? We've seen changes in the circadian system. We also have changes in the amount that we sleep. And it appears that sleep does change across the lifespan. Equally important across different stages, but it plays very different roles in early child development and also in the later years as we're repairing tissue, as we're consolidating memory, or shifting how memory is consolidated during different regions, different periods of development. Regions of the brain sleep during the day, and regions of the brain wake during sleep. So they've actually found that there are micro sleeps during the day, and there are periods of wakefulness at night as well. So our brain cannot, if we're sleep deprived in particular, regions of the brain just go offline because our brain cannot sustain that degree of wakefulness during the day. Recent study has demonstrated that the default mode network, which I'll define in a couple of minutes, the salience network, and the executive function network, these are all critical regions of the brain that DMN is basically ego, executive function network is our thinking brain, salience network gives us a sense of where we are in space and time and helps us use information from around us. So we now know that different regions of the brain go on and offline during sleep. But that also speaks to this issue of there being continuity of consciousness or some kind of consciousness throughout the course of the night. Lots of words here. So cognitive emotional functions of sleep. There's neural replay. Neurons in the hippocampus replay sequences of activity patterns that occurred during learning and during the day. So our brain is literally replaying during the night what's gone on during the day to help us both consolidate and eliminate some of the non-essential information. Synaptic homeostasis sleep helps balance of synaptic strengthening and weakening, which is essential for efficient memory storage. So in other words, connections between individual cells in the brain, kind of the more we use, the more we focus on something, the more we think about it, the stronger connections in the brain. So this is also facilitated and kind of nailed down, concretized during sleep. Neurotransmitter activity, changes in neurotransmitter levels such as acetylcholine and serotonin during different stages facilitate different aspects of memory consolidation. And finally, emotion downregulation, as I said, regions of the brain that regulate emotion are downregulated during rapid eye movement sleep, which essentially give them a rest. When we selectively deprive people of rapid eye movement sleep, right, or if you pull an all-nighter, how do you feel the next day? Well, when you're up in the morning, you're often a little bit manic if you've not slept at night, right? You have that kind of burst of activity. And some of that manicness is associated with these emotional regions of the brain not having rested. When that's chronic, it leads to depression, affective disorders, bipolar disorder. It can trigger bipolar events. Sleep deprivation can. That downregulation is critically important. We think about adolescents who are night owls relative to us. We wake them up to go to school at 5:30, 6 in the morning to get on their buses for a 7:30 school start time. That's like asking us to wake up at 3 or 4 a.m. and be functional. Have a good breakfast, right? Wake up, eat, right? So what's happening to these kids is that throughout the course of the week, they're losing their rapid eye movement sleep in the morning, which contributes to mood disturbance, perhaps depression, less emotion regulation in classrooms, etc. And higher risk when we see sleep disturbance in adolescents who are depressed, who've got other problems, it's also a very, very important marker for suicidal risk and suicide attempts. Okay, so what can we do to optimize our sleep health? So first, sanctifying sleep, right? Establish rituals, not routines, but rituals. Really create things that you do around your bedtime that make it an important time of the day. Including prayers, including anticipation of going into a holy period where there will be a lot of healing. Quiet and together time before sleep is exceedingly important. We are social creatures. Sleep is essentially a social activity. When we sleep either in a locked environment, we know it's locked, but most importantly, our ancestors and children sleep close to other people, and that social cueing is very, very important for healthy and optimal sleep. Regular timing and duration of sleep. So we tend to think of, you'll say, I had you sleep last night. I only slept for 6 hours. But the question is also, when did you sleep last night? The circadian system is essentially important. So it's not just how much we slept, but it's when we slept and on a consistent basis that's essential for our health. Understanding the qualitative experience of sleep shifts throughout the night, right? That we cannot anticipate having just this kind of this night, this evening where we're completely out of it. There are changes. Regulation of diet and caffeine are essential. Not having a late meal, cutting out caffeine early in the day. In particular, if you have insomnia or know that you're sensitive to it. No electronic media or bright light within 60 minutes of bedtime, optimally, and in the middle of the night as well. Establish a comfortable sleep environment, address sleep problems. So anyone who snores needs a sleep study. If you mouth breathe, particularly at night, you need a sleep study. And we can talk about that more later. Restlessness during sleep, excessive daytime sleepiness. These are 3 of the most common types of markers of sleep disturbance that need to be addressed. Clear traces of your waking concerns before you go to sleep at night. So take some time to either meditate, keep a little worry journal so that you can write down what's on your mind before you go to bed at night, so then when you have that 3 or 4 a.m. awakening, you can then say to yourself, it's down, it's written down, it's put away, I don't have to worry about it. So really prepare yourself for your sleep period. All right, so I'll talk just a little bit about some regions of the brain, just for the sake of comparison. As I said, the default mode network. This is a region of the brain. It's actually a network of regions in the brain, not located in just one place, that's active during periods of relaxed wakefulness, introspection, and judgments of others and ourselves. It's active during daydreaming. It's the address of the ego. That's how Michael Pollan has defined it. Self-referential behavior, more reasoning, recollection, and imagining the future cognitive processes thought to be unique to humans all are kind of related to the default mode network. Ego not necessarily being a bad thing, but as it controls us, as we tell stories about ourselves during the day, we want to be able to drop ego. One of the functions of plant medicines is to help with a disconnection of ego. The connections between the default mode network and other regions of the brain and within the default mode network change as a result of plant medicines. They also change during different stages of sleep, and I'll go over a little bit of that right now. Just quickly, and I'm not going to go into the regions of the brain, it's a little bit beyond my knowledge, but the key here is that the medial frontal cortex, this frontal part of the brain, basically gets disconnected from other regions of the brain during deep non-REM stage 3 sleep. So we're essentially disconnected. There's a deep disconnection of ego during non-REM stage 3 sleep. This also shows more complicated connections during all the other phases of sleep. The point here simply being that the brain continues to be exceedingly active, but certain parts of the brain go on and offline so that certain functions of memory consolidation, emotion regulation, learning, etc., can occur. And we think that all of these connections are absolutely essential. There's a lot of research now looking at consciousness during sleep. Jennifer Wint, a researcher, philosopher, has written a tome about dreaming as a window into consciousness, that we can use sleep, what goes on and offline, to help facilitate our understanding of what consciousness is. And I think that this is a relatively new field. Julia Tononi and others are pursuing this. One of the people who've pursued this, and maybe some of you heard his talk recently at UCSB at the SAGE series, wonderful series, Ken Paller, has been doing research at Northwestern looking at memory facilitation during slow-wave sleep, as well as lucid dreaming and inducing lucid dreaming.
It was done by a research group at Israel's Weizmann Institute. They took habitual smokers and asked them to track how much they smoked over a particular week. Then, at the end of that week, they asked the smokers to come into the lab for a night of sleep. Then, over the following week, they tracked how much they smoked again. It turned out that over that following week, they smoked significantly less. So what happened to the smokers when they slept in the lab? It all comes down to what they smelled during the night. Laura Shanahan is a neuroscientist at Northwestern University who does similar research studying sleep and odors.
Sleep is really important for consolidating our memories. What if we could actually go in and manipulate that process? The sense of smell is often a really underappreciated sense.
So when the smokers in this study slept in the lab, they were equipped with an odor delivery system and an EEG to track what stage of sleep they were in.
When they fell asleep, researchers presented two different smells to their noses repetitively: cigarette smoke and the smell of rotten eggs. They had no idea that they had smelled these smells during sleep.
Without their awareness, their sleeping brains, by a somewhat mysterious process, associated cigarette smell with the rotten egg smell, and as a result,
they were less inclined to smoke cigarettes for the following week.
Laura was intrigued by research like the Israeli study and wanted to understand the mechanism that makes such a powerful transformation during sleep possible.
What we wanted to understand was what happens in your brain when you smell an odor during sleep.
She designed a study wherein the subjects played a simple memory game involving pictures of animals, buildings, faces, and tools.
They were learning the locations of these pictures on a 4x4 grid.
Before their memories of those locations were tested, they were hooked up to a machine that delivers odors to their noses.
Most of us have a particular scent that evokes a very specific memory. In our study, we decided to take advantage of this system. So for instance, they might learn that cedar odor belonged with pictures of animals, and that rose odor was associated with pictures of buildings.
So the cedar smell goes with animals, the scent of roses, buildings. Then the participants went to sleep in the MRI machine. During deep sleep, Shanahan presented them with cedar odor but not rose odor. From the MRI, she could see just how much the cedar odor reactivated in their brains images of animals. Now it was time for the participants to wake up and take the memory test. Would that unremembered mental replay of animals during sleep improve their memories of the animal pictures?
So people had a better memory for those locations that were reactivated by odors during sleep.
Without knowing why, they were better at remembering the locations of the animal pictures compared to the building locations. Similarly, in the Israeli study, the subjects' memories of smoking and rotten eggs were presumably re-triggered, reducing their desire to smoke. What's strange, though, is that these memory manipulations, which can profoundly impact our behavior, only work if the subject is sleeping. So what if you could actually control the images that appeared in your sleeping mind?
But the point is that there's some phenomenal research going on right now where they actually plant memories during slow-wave sleep to facilitate dreaming using smell and other light cues, and they can actually induce and engage with people and communicate people during lucid dreaming states, which again kind of opens up all these questions around sleep consciousness, waking consciousness, and the continuity of those. So I'm going to show you a couple more clips of other types of brain activity that occurs during sleep states. So in this next clip, this child, if we looked at his brain, we would see that he's in slow wave sleep. Okay? So he's sound asleep.
Are you alright now? Ronnie, Mommy's here. Ronnie, Mommy's here. Look, Ronnie, Mama's here. Mommy, 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 Here's Harry Night Terror, buddy.
You get the point that basically this child is having this really dramatic event called a parasomnia, a sleep terror. Okay, looks like he's awake, eyes are open, trying to engage with his mother who's sitting right in front of him. His little sister kind of comes up to him, gives him his blanket, says, "Wake up, sweetie, everything's okay, mommy's right here." But he's in an exceedingly deep state of sleep. So there's a disconnection, there's this active activity during sleep state where part of the brain is awake, part of the brain is asleep. Also, more of a window into the kind of activity that's going on during the brain during sleep state. And any of you who have had a pet have probably seen this. This is a little severe. This gets worse, unfortunately, for this puppy. So this dog is sound asleep in rapid eye movement, dreaming sleep. Okay. So this is a condition that we call in humans REM behavior disorder, where we don't have the atonia, right? We can see people who are dreaming. We can watch our pets who are dreaming have a little bit of a breakthrough of the REM paralysis. Again, kind of cognitive states that are regulated, dysregulated during sleep. So when we think about states of consciousness, we can think about some of the differences between, say, focused attention, when we're engaged in a task, very focused during the day. We can also think about flow state, right? When all of our body and brain are deeply engaged in an activity where we're using all of our functioning and focus at the same time. There's also mind wandering, studied by a colleague and really interesting guy here who runs a couple of talk series, Jonathan Schooler at UCSB, where the mind kind of just travels from thing to thing. And there's a high percentage of mind wandering and daydreaming that occurs during the day. Mind wandering is a more non-intentional state where our mind just moves from idea to idea, versus daydreaming where we're actually thinking through, trying out different scenarios, just like we might do during dreaming sleep. It's in the sleep that we can actually practice things, think what the outcomes might be, try them on emotionally. Meditative states, when we're trying to quiet our brain. Non-ordinary states, using plant medicines, using breath, etc. REM dream state, with the illusion of self-generated awareness, and finally all the stages of non-REM sleep where we've seen that there's this evidence of conscious awareness. So I will leave that up, and I'll take about 7 to 10 minutes, if that's okay, and just run through kind of a guided, focused meditation that will kind of walk you through some of these different stages. I invite you to put your hands in a relaxed place, perhaps on your thighs. If you're comfortable doing so, you can close your eyes or pick a focus point ahead of you. I do want to say that if anyone has had trauma, or if going into a meditative state can activate trauma, perhaps don't engage with this, just sit quietly, take a break, etc. There's nothing that I'm going to do that will activate trauma, but for some people, going into this relaxed state can initiate trauma. So begin by just focusing on your breath and how your breath is moving your body. What moves as you breathe? Focus on the quality of the air as it comes in and out of your nostrils. Cool, dry in, warm, humidified out. Now draw that cool air deeper into your nostrils and observe what changes in the musculature in your upper airway as you draw that cool air deeper into your nostrils. And then exhaling, warming up those same regions. Now draw that air deeper down into your throat, in the coolness of the air in your throat. Now your chest. And maybe you can even feel that cool air entering your lungs. Now in a relaxed state, focusing on physical sensation. Now moving on to a meditative state where there's really no focus at all. As thoughts come in and out, you can let them go. Let them drift. They don't matter right now. Moving into a state of awareness that with practice becomes pure awareness. We'll now transition into the experience of stage 1 sleep. This is that transitional, liminal state of sleep where we release all control as we lie comfortably in our bed, letting go. You can imagine that as you drift into this state, this imagined state, our eyes and visual sensory experiences are relaxing and releasing. And we have occasional automatic thoughts that enter in this state. Imagine that you're sitting in a restaurant across from someone you love. You pick up your fork. You're gazing at their eyes. Your fork hits your glass. You drop the fork, and you have a little jerk awake, realizing that you've been in this thought process. Or imagine an automatic thought of walking along a trail, looking up at the beautiful trees. Your foot catches a branch. You trip a little bit. You catch yourself, and you jerk awake for just a moment. Part of the process of letting go, the physiological release of muscle tone. Now, as we drift into stage 2 sleep, this is where memory consolidation occurs, and we have static thoughts. We have thoughts about doing things again and again. In this awareness, you can allow the thoughts to come and go. Watch them coming and going, but don't attach to them. Just let them drift. You are just an observer. In this state, your ego is disconnected, you're emotionally uninvolved, you're just watching thoughts come and go. We're then welcomed into the deepest stage of sleep, stage 3, for which we have a tremendous hunger, where we're deeply relaxed. A wonderful feeling of deep, deep, deep relaxation. Our body and brain take care of us by shutting down all external stimuli. Here there's a deep level of mental processing. Emotions may arise, thoughts may arise, but they're out of your control. You can't latch on to them. In this state, your ego is engaged, so you're having the experience of identity and thought. But you're in a deep, deep, non-responsive state. And now your body transitions into rapid eye movement sleep. Your limbs, your whole body becomes heavy, so heavy that you can't even really move. You can test this state of sleep by trying to move just a little bit, but feeling the heaviness of your limbs holding you down. And imagine as you enter this dream state, you're sitting in a beautiful place in nature. Beautiful flowers, beautiful trees. You watch a bird fly toward you. This is a familiar spot that you've been before, perhaps even a spot where you've gone as a child. And as the bird flies toward you, you look closely at it and realize that the face of the bird is that of one of your closest childhood friends. You simply accept this as they're appearing in a different form. And they beckon to you to come and join them. And you glide up next to them. You sit on a tree with them. And they invite you to fly away. You nuzzle up next to them and instead say goodbye, and off they fly. Your body weightiness releases, and we'll now move on to one final state, a non-ordinary state, where everything in your environment can be a focus of interest. Imagine that in this state you're walking along a path in a deep forest, and you become aware of a tree ahead of you, and you walk up to that tree. You look at the bark and become fascinated with the color, the roughness, the random patterns in the bark. And notice that the bark begins to move, almost as if it's circling around the tree, and you put your hand up to it to feel its movement, and your hand becomes one with bark. You embrace the tree. feeling the roughness of the bark, seeing shades of color shift as you look more closely at the bark. And you realize that your hand has almost merged into the tree. The sensory experience, the vision, your tactile experience all meld together. Sense of time evaporates. All that matters is your engagement. Okay, as you're ready, focusing on your breath again, maybe moving your body a little bit. Opening your eyes, I welcome you back.
No, but it was beautiful to be able to, with all the introduction, all the education that you give us, to be aware of what are the steps, unconsciously being aware how you're guiding us to into the sleep, and it gives you so much empowerment, right? You feel more empowered that you can, many of my clients, I work as a coach and energy healing, and sleep disorders is huge. And after all the information that you put in our brain, guiding us, I think it was super empowering to understand, I can do something now instead of being sad or overwhelmed for being tired. So thank you. To me, it was very, very, very beautiful.
Thank you.
And thank you for bringing us back. I will start snoring anytime.
Thanks for going on a little journey.
So thank you. I know that you have so much information and passion for teaching that I will go deep in every single slice that you put up there, and imagine that many people have questions. And we are in the time, technically, in the time that we're supposed to close. So I would love to know who has a question and any, yes.
Yeah, Danny, you said a couple times, if I understood you, that emotions are suppressed during REM sleep. But then, we have these experiences that it seems very real or scary, so I don't quite understand how these things go together.
Yeah, so different regions of the brain are on and offline during rapid eye movement sleep. Some of the deepest centers of the brain that particularly are kind of the reactive centers of the brain. So there's centers of the brain that might be more involved in flight, fright, freeze, or those that are kind of in a quiescent state. We are, during rapid eye movement sleep, there's a relative disconnection of certain regions of the default mode network. So we are more observers of our dream rather than engaged in our dream. So it's a great question. I'm not sure we fully know the answer. I think we're discovering more. We do experience emotion during our dreams, but perhaps more as an observer and less experiencing the dream, perhaps. Longest time without sleep? Personally, maybe 24 hours. Probably not a hell of a lot more than that. It's deeply challenging. What I'd love to know, kind of what from your experience, whether or not you've gone for long periods, whether being in meditative states for days, whether or not you've had different experiences with sleep.
Not with that, but in the service, when we trained, we went regularly without 36 hours without sleep, sometimes longer. But I was saying, I used to sleep while I was marching, and I really slept. But I was still in line, and I was still keeping cadence. Every once in a while, the guy behind you would poke you and say you're asleep. You're going off to the side or something. But I never realized how it could be done. But when you hear you talk about turning on and off, the part that makes you go can be turned on, but the part that you need to be intellectual to think, to critically think, can be turned off.
So the brain and there's actually some of the most interesting sleep research has been initiated by the military and looking at human factors to understand how you can put people into situations where a second of shift in performance can result in the life and death of themselves, their comrades, and others as well. And there's phenomenal research that's come out of that. Certainly medications are used when people have to be on long sorties or missions. They also have shown that it's essential to bank sleep. So if you're anticipating, if you're going to be traveling across time zones, or if you're anticipating an all-nighter, either take that disco nap or really do bank your sleep on the preceding days, really, in preparation, which really is protective and really does help you. There's no essential catching up on your sleep. When we deprive people of dreaming sleep, rapid eye movement sleep chronically, their brain will automatically go into these hypnagogic dream-like states, because we can more easily suppress slow wave sleep, but not dreaming sleep. And I don't know about the atonia, whether or not the extent to which that comes back during dreaming sleep. So when you were marching, you might have been in some hypnagogic state, but not full on rapid eye movement sleep. Hard to say. Yeah.
So if you are, well, for example, I have insomnia, and if you optimize your sleep and do all the modalities to optimize your sleep health, and you are not successful, what is the next step as far as finding out the why or discovering how to get optimal sleep?
So insomnia is a disorder of difficulty initiating sleep, maintaining sleep, or just really eroded sleep quality that becomes a habitual problem over days, months, years for some people. And it can be caused, in some more rare cases, it can be associated with psychiatric disorders or medical problems, changes in life, etc. But the run-of-the-mill insomnia, the best treatment is something called cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia, which is different than regular cognitive behavior therapy. There are 6 components. It does require some training to implement it, but it does several things. It maximizes your schedule, which is critically important. It increases your sleep drive or sleep appetite, so to speak, and really consolidates it. And by consolidating your sleep drive, increasing your sleep appetite, you begin to change some of the negative associations that you have with sleep. So often sleep becomes kind of the torture chamber. So you're changing all these associations, changing your cognitions, learning about sleep. I mean, if everyone with insomnia knew that it was normal to wake up at night for a few minutes or even an hour, that's a really important piece of knowledge, right?
It's like you gave me that because I wake up at 3:30 and then I'm just up. Right. So I sleep about 3-4 hours a night and then I'm just wired and I'm going, what's wrong with me? But knowing that and maybe there could be a second opportunity for sleep. Yes. And just getting myself back in there because I'm ready to run a marathon at 3:30.
Yeah. So feeling that level of activation can also be a result of your having your first dream. So it might be that you're in a dream state, and whether that dream is negative or positive, you've got a high emotional activation. And when you wake up with that high emotional activation, the perception is, why am I so activated? I've been sound asleep. I want to sleep more. I know it's time. So you can view that emotional activation, the feeling of needing to go, simply.
Heart rate will, I'll reach tachycardia, and then, and I'm just,
really activated. So part of the practice in treatment of insomnia is mindfulness practices, also changing the association and changing the cognitive response to I'm awake. Why the hell am I awake? I feel so activated. I feel so emotionally activated. Again, I've probably woken up from a dream. It's normal to have this emotional activation at night. What can I do to calm myself? This is a reminder that I'm a human being. This is a time of the night when a lot of people wake up briefly. I'm not going to look at the clock. I'm not going to look at my phone, right? The ritual that I referenced. So we talk about sleep routines. I try to change the dialogue to ritual so that we really, again, ritualize our transitions to sleep and sanctify them. So if you have a sleep time ritual as you're transitioning to sleep and reinitiate that in the middle of the night, that association can signal safety, can signal comfort, and can also be very, very helpful.
Yeah, because I have no problem falling asleep. It's just when I wake up, then I'm like, and then it's just coming back to that. So just maybe that shift in perception. And it's okay.
Yeah, and it's also timing. So it may be that when one of the interventions of CBTI is we consolidate or compress sleep. So people with insomnia tend to spend a lot of time in bed awake. So we limit that. And we limit people's sleep to the average amount of time that they're getting over the course of a week, which we could kind of theoretically define as their sleep hunger or intrinsic sleep appetite. So when we compress it to the amount of time that they sleep on average, so you might feel like you feel best when you sleep 7.5 to 8 hours, but if we compress it to what you're actually getting, which is between 6.5 and 7 for a week, you get pretty sleep deprived, and that compression also helps change some of those associations, amplifying your sleep drive at the same time. Results in some.
Suggest staying in bed, thinking about, or you would suggest just going into a ritual, like
reinitiating. Yeah, so reinitiating the ritual that you had at the beginning of the night can be exceedingly helpful, and could mean getting out of bed. One of the interventions for insomnia is something called stimulus control, where you dissociate wakefulness in the bed, because for people with insomnia, the bed becomes associated with frustration, anxiety, wondering why you're up. So we're changing those associations also by getting up, sitting quietly, doing something that does not require light, maybe quietly reading from a book or a Kindle, as opposed to getting on your phone, or at least having the Amber Light app on your phone, which is protective. Yeah, so just a few tips. Yeah.
Danny, quick question. Smoking weed to help you sleep. I've noticed smoking sometimes will actually help me fall asleep, but I'm interested / concerned, like if it has, what consequences it has on the quality of sleep. So I'm curious if you have anything to say about that.
Yeah, so any alcohol, marijuana, both help us kind of relax, let down our anxiety, and let go. So if you are very activated when you go to sleep and it's helping that, in the very short term, that's okay. More chronic use of THC and alcohol erode kind of the internal quality of sleep. So actually suppresses rapid eye movement sleep pretty powerfully. And over the long term, consistent use of THC is really not optimal for your sleep.
I'm curious about disassociation. Like if someone has an intense emotional experience, they start to disassociate. Like how does that mimic sleep in any ways, or like cycles, or like, what does that look like?
Wow, great question. So I would say that we probably dissociate in our dreams, in our dream state. We can also feel a sense of dissociation or floating in transitional states. So there are phenomena called hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucinations, where we go into a state of hallucinatory-like activity as we transition into sleep or out of sleep. And that has to do with a whole host of, it can occur for a lot of different factors, but some of that is probably letting go of ego, letting ego drop down. I don't know if that gets at your question, but I mean, it's a really interesting question, kind of where regions of the brain go, what goes on and offline during sleep, and we're just starting to understand a lot of that right now. Yeah. Does that get at your question a little bit? Okay. Yeah.
Is there any way to record a dream other than recording rapid eye movement?
So certainly dream reports can be, you can train yourself to be a kind of more effective reporter of your dream states, and to wake up from a dream, spend some time writing it down, doing a brief recording of it. so that you notate it. There have been studies, animal studies. Some of that, you saw the EEG caps that they were wearing, where they can really localize different regions of the brain with the EEG caps, and they can kind of see some patterns of activation. In animal studies, I know that they will have like rats running a maze, and they'll have deep placement of electrodes, and we'll observe where the learning of the maze takes place. And see that replicated during different sleep states. So they can get at that high level of resolution of neural activity to actually see that repeated. But aside from that, yeah. Beautiful, beautiful and interesting science. It's a great question. Will we be able to see it in the future? Will we have the tools? Perhaps with higher resolution, using those EEG caps with AI type paradigms and being able to do high processing analysis of electrical activity in different regions of the brain. Perhaps we can begin to drill down on different thought patterns, but it would be highly individualized because of the way and regions in which we store memory, right? You may store your sensory memory in one way that links to emotions or thoughts, whereas for someone else it'd be completely different. So maybe for an individual, we could begin to drill down on that. But it's a fascinating question. Yeah.
Yes, so many questions, but I think the one I'm most interested in right now is on the second to last slide. I saw a flash of something around, consciousness and healing states, and I'm just curious, what is happening in the brain during a healing state, whether it be happening when we're conscious or asleep, and two, what can we do to promote those states?
So I think the answer would depend a bit on kind of what we're healing. So if we're going through, if we've had trauma, sleep often is very, very disturbed, and it's the trauma linkages that we have during the day, emotion, where that's stored in the body, how that gets reactivated. I'm not a trauma therapist, but that can be probably reinforced in some ways at night. So it's probably in that case, that kind of healing maybe should take place during the day. But in terms of our kind of managing our emotions that are kind of regulated during our sleep states, things that are strengthened and things that are sloughed off during our sleep states, how that occurs, we don't really fully know yet. I like the Tibetan Buddhist or the Bon Buddhist approach, where we spend our day really kind of in preparation for sleep at night. They have a whole series of exercises and thoughts and breathing that you engage in to essentially open up your chakras, clearing your karmic traces so that you're going into sleep, with also the suggestion of I am going to engage in my dreams. So I love the idea of that, and the science behind that is perhaps evolving. So practices, again, that sanctify your sleep, prepare you for it, that allow you to clear your daytime activities, your worries, your anxiety, etc., before we go into sleep, may very well have long-term benefits.
I would like to address, I'm working as a coach, as a healer. One of the things when they have this problem, we talk about what is, consciously that it comes to the person. But my background is also in healing meditation and yoga. So one of the things that I work with my client is first the rituals, right? And also set up the intention that you want to rest, or the intention that you want to heal. If you set up the intention and use yourself in those rituals into having a restful night, restore your body, or even resolve these questions. I take naps that I 20 minutes nap, 10 minutes nap with a question, and asking myself when I wake up, thank you, unconscious mind, soul, to bring me the answer. So I'm interacting with that dreaming state to get the best out of it. And I make my clients to do it, and they really got to improve the relationship with the dream, with the going to sleep, instead of being and also change the beliefs, because many people think that they need to sleep like a log. I know we're humans, as you said. You're using your own words, and one of the questions that I have is, What about the snoring? In my ignorance, the snoring is the way that as primal beings, we protect ourselves with the noise at night. And you said that snoring is not good. That if I snore, it's not that I need to change girlfriends, so I need to find someone that can sleep next to me. There is a way that I need to treat that?
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot that we did to kind of protect ourselves during sleep. We've got a fascinating relationship with fire, right? Fire throughout all of human history was ultimately protective. It not only kind of killed the smoke, not only killed the beasts living in the thatched roofs, but it also hid our scent, right? The sound of the fire at night was hypnotic and helped us sleep and actually signaled safety through many periods of time. So white noise, right? Unfortunately, snoring, which might mask, might also attract. But snoring is basically, this is a very complex region of the body here, right? It talks, it eats, it breathes. There is so much neurological tissue here that maintains patency of the upper airway that when we do have narrowing or collapse potentially, which occurs at night when our musculature relaxes, it happens even more during dreaming sleep, right? Because our bodies are paralyzed and there's less support for the upper respiratory musculature. Then we get these decreases in the size of the airway, right? Which then causes more air pressure for us to breathe in through more air pressure, right? Which then causes a vibration of the tissue, which is snoring, which is a signal of decreased airflow into the brain and body, which ultimately is problematic. I mean, let's just all take a moment and snore together, right? Let's go. Ready? Here we go. Horrible, right? Can you imagine? And just the sense of like what that's like, right? Right now, right? Horrible that you'd be doing that all night long. Maybe you feel safe. Yes, question.
I bring this up. Did you know Ben Franklin's cure for insomnia?
Oh, no, I don't.
So I read it in Poor Richard's Almanac, and I thought this is a parlor trick, right? Because it'll never work. But Ben Franklin had horrible insomnia. He had a house full of beds. And when he would wake up from his insomnia, he'd go to sleep in another bed, and as soon as he hit the other bed, he'd fall asleep through the night. I'm like, yeah, this is all made up. It works.
Yeah. So the reason that might work is because we're changing the association, right? If our bed becomes associated with wakefulness in the middle of the night, sleeping in a new environment might help to calm that, perhaps.
I mean, as soon as I lay down, I go to sleep.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a bad approach. It just, if you have the resources and enough beds around, clearly. Yeah. Yeah, question.
Go ahead. That meditation that you guided us on, did you create that, or is that standard somewhere where we can find that somewhere?
The sleep meditation I created. I need to copyright it, put it online. I'm not quite sure yet how it's helpful. If anybody has comments or thoughts about how it's helpful.
She'd love it too.
Yeah, okay.
To touch the tree, my hand went like this. So I was like, I noticed that. Yeah. So I was obviously in there. So.
In there. I think it empowers us and it goes along with the education around what goes on during sleep states so that we can kind of coach our brain and imagine what we're doing. I don't know what other experiences people have had.
That's how I felt. It felt like like I could kind of wrap my mind around this and organize it and then kind of felt a little bit safer to drop into each of the segments instead of this huge abyss and then there's all these associations with it and what do I do with this sleep? It's this huge thing. So that I just felt like really just helped to break it down, put into these segments, and then I can see where the practice of doing that, even at nighttime before going to bed, I feel like then it's practicing it. And then when you go into sleep, then, you're already like practicing it and you may know better what to do in each of those segments. So that's
wonderful. Thanks. Appreciate that.
So
I will. Question.
2 questions. When you wake up at night to read a book, could you use a red light? And then also using red lights maybe at 8 a.m., 8 p.m. to get your melatonin kicked in. Other question, why do they sleep different? And that's what you mentioned about the baby, being able to pick them up and not, put them in bed and not waking up, or else that dream that little kid is having. Yeah. So.
Good question. So the blue spectrum light, activates the region of the brain. So light comes in through the eyes, goes through the optic chiasm, which is kind of the track that goes to the back of the brain, where we process all of our visual information. About a third of the way there's a region called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which relates to the pineal gland, which releases melatonin. So it's very important to have dim light or non-blue spectrum light as you're preparing for bed at night and in the middle of the night and when you're reading in the middle of the night, so that we're not activating that connection. Andrew Huberman claims, and I don't know the science on this, that blue light in the middle of the night actually releases other hormones that are problematic or activates regions of the brain that are problematic as well. So for probably a whole host of reasons, it's best not to be exposed to light. It really is helpful to use your Amber app, or to use dimmer light when you read, or to just listen to a podcast or a calming book. It could be a red light bulb or amber light. Obviously you need enough to read. A Kindle is good because it's just on that backlit or night mode is good. But a dim light, it's probably fine as long as the light is not, if it's kind of a regular bulb, at least it's not going directly into your eyes, but is illuminating the page, so you're just getting the reflected light. That said, if you don't have a circadian rhythm disorder, it may not be as problematic. Light is not just it's probably healthier to be in dim light. We all know that if we've gone camping, right? When you go camping, you sleep great, right? Why is that? Well, a whole host of factors, right? You want to be tucked in and safe, because if you go outside, that thin veneer that's protecting you from the world, it feels dangerous, right? So it kind of keeps you inside, and there's reduced light, and you're following the natural light of your environment, which can be super helpful. So the other question regarding kids, so kids, their sleep is different for probably a whole host of reasons. They are not only creating all kinds of new connections between neurons in their brain, but they're also sloughing off. They're eliminating tens of thousands, if not millions of neurons during different phases of development. One of the reasons that their slow wave sleep, their delta sleep, looks huge is that kids have far more neurons than adults. So for a whole host of reasons related to brain development, related to physical development, slow wave sleep is associated with the release of growth hormone. If that's disrupted, it can disrupt sleep. That can be disrupted because of snoring in children, which is not so uncommon. And then finally, the kid who you saw was having a parasomnia, one of the many parasomnias, same category as sleepwalking. He was having a sleep terror where he woke up with a horrible scream, was exceedingly activated, but again, his brain was asleep. So did that kind of get at your question, or?
I don't know. Yes, I guess maybe. Well, yeah, I think I might expect a different answer. I don't know. Okay. But it kind of did, yeah.
One of the reasons that kids will have more sleepwalking and sleep terrors and more of those awakenings during the night is because their sleep drive to be in deep sleep is exceedingly high. It's higher than ours. As we age, the drive for that stage, the size of those waves diminishes somewhat. So kids are more likely to kind of wake up and have one of those partial awakenings from deep sleep.
Well, amazing, Danny. I have so many questions, but I'd rather than to ask you directly, since you told me that it was a 3-hour presentation reduced to 1, and we're already 1.5. So, my last question it was about what you answered about how much it changed the sleep through the aging. People, is that a myth or is that truth?
It's absolutely true. So
it's absolutely true.
As we get older, the types of sleep drives that we have shift a bit. We still have a high need for sleep. We don't necessarily have an erosion of sleep quality. That said, menopause is a phenomenal disruptor of sleep in the short term. Medications, other illnesses, etc., can have a negative impact on sleep. But the brain is changing. We're making different connections, like the number of connections, the amount of novelty that we have as adults is diminished compared to what the novelty, say, that an infant or a young child has. So how those connections are working and the purpose that sleep serves does change over the course of our lifespan.
Is that true that you need less sleep when you get older? I'm not there, but when I get older.
Not really. We probably need about the same amount of sleep. It can reduce a little bit. The timing of sleep can also shift because as we age into our 60s, 70s, and 80s, we...
Far away from it.
Yes, no, of course. I wasn't... when you get there, 10 to 20 years from now. The timing, the optimal timing of your sleep also shifts. So going to bed earlier and waking up earlier. So the timing of sleep may also change for people as well. But the sleep drive is still high. The qualitative nature of sleep, the quality of sleep does feel different though as we age. And accommodating to that, adapting it, and accepting it as a normal shift is important.
The part that is the most important part is that Jacob needs to go home.
Kids at home?
Yes, he's loved this place, but he also has a family. And
yes.
But is there any way that people can contact you and ask you for there is anything that you would like to tell them before we get to a closing?
There you go.
And also, when are we having you back? Because we need part 2. Is that correct? Who wanted part 2 of this? Yes. Yeah.
Happy to talk about sleep disorders. Thank you. Thank you,
Daniel.
very much.
Thank you.
I just want to say that's that little one sitting right back there, sleeping in the back of the car, helping me do sleep research, teaching me about sleep. Yeah.
Said children have more connections going on in their brain, so they need more sleep. If we were to all consciously create more connections in our brain, does that mean we need more sleep? And would that answer Daniel's question?
A lot more novelty during our day, a lot more exercise, a lot of factors that we engage in would probably shift the internal organization and drives for sleep so that we can accommodate that novel information. So things do change, the cause and effect and how that happens, and should we all have more novelty? Yeah, that's why we live where we live. All right, thank you all. I can hang around for
thank
questions.
you very much.